Hello, friends. Thank you for visiting with me today as we bring in the new year with a hearty homemade chili that is budget-friendly and just the right amount for 2 people, with maybe a little left over that will make a good chili mac this week, or that I will freeze to mix with previous batches later. You'll start out with 1 pound of ground beef. I prefer the 85/15, but use whatever you can get. The most budget-friendly is what we're looking for. We're going to go ahead and put that in our pan and clean up, wash our hands. I'm turning my heat on to high so I can start cooking. I apologize in advance for the little bit of camera shake going on in the video. I had it sitting in the sink and didn't realize it would detect every movement from my tiny kitchen. We're going to add some chopped peppers to ours now. I had these frozen from our garden this year. And you can use whatever peppers you like. We like jalapeno, but you can use bell peppers, green, red, doesn't matter. If you don't like peppers, leave them out. This is a very forgiving recipe. We're then going to go ahead and add a small onion. Now I like to use the whole onion as I find that it really gives it a lot of flavor. We're going to break up the meat too as we're cooking this so that it can be cooking properly and sweating out those peppers and sweating out the onions. We'll chop that up pretty fine, well, whatever size you like. As it cooks over time, it gets really soft, so if you don't like big bites of large onion, then I would suggest chopping it up into small diced pieces. I realize cooking for 2 may be easier than cooking for a larger family, but it's really all about scale. What I'm doing here can easily be stretched by adding cans of beans and doubling the recipe. I will put this recipe in the description below, as well as a link to a printable PDF if you'd like to have it for your home recipe book. One thing I've learned about making the best chili is that the long, slow cook time really makes a difference in the depth of flavor. Now I'm using some old garlic here, about 3 garlic cloves that I'm chopping up. You can use the jarred if you like. I actually usually use the jarred. It's just easier. But I had these and I didn't want them to go to waste, so I'm making a point to use them up. It's important to use what you have so it doesn't spoil and go to waste, especially when you're trying to save on money, save on your budget. Once this is done, I will transfer the chili over to a crock pot. But if you don't have one, you can still cook it very low heat on the stove. You do have to stir it frequently though, or else it'll burn. Chili burns easily, and you really don't want to have burnt chili because you can't. It goes in the trash. It's really awful. Ask me how I know. So now we're going to go ahead and measure out our spices. I usually use about a tablespoon of chili powder, but whatever, you can use as much or as little as you like. A tablespoon is the basic amount. I actually do normally add a little extra. In this case, it was the end of the container, so I went ahead and just used the whole amount. I love the taste of cumin in my chili, and I usually use a lot more than what I'm even showing in here because I prefer it to be heavy. I do go in and stir the meat occasionally just so that, it's getting cooked thoroughly all the way through. And I'm switching over to a spoon now just because I've already broken up the meat pretty much in the smaller pieces that I like. I'm going to go ahead and get out the oregano. It's a surprise ingredient that I didn't used to put in chili, but it really does make a difference when it's missing. It's like it helps with the depth of flavor. So we're going to use a half of a teaspoon of oregano. And the reason that I'm putting all of this in a small container is that it's easier to add it all to the chili so they all can bloom at the same time. And there I'm adding a half of a teaspoon of black pepper, and we'll do another half of a teaspoon of salt. And that's really the basic ingredients. You don't need to add these other ingredients. These other two are optional. And that's a half a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. It will increase the heat. So if you don't like a hot chili, then don't add the red pepper flakes and don't add the cayenne. It will increase the heat of the chili as far as like spicy heat. The last several years have been very difficult for our family. My husband and I had to sell our home a few years ago and move from the city to a very, very small town to be closer to my mom and stepdad, who were aging in place. Years ago, I daydreamed about living in the country away from it all, but as I've gotten older, I realized that being closer to stores and good quality medical facilities gets more important. Here I've added my spices and I'm heating them down on a low heat, and that what it does is it causes those spices to really bloom and push some of that flavor into the meat, which is really helpful. If for some reason you don't do it this way and you add it to the sauce later, that's fine too. It will work either way. You're going to go ahead and cook this thoroughly. Get the flavors all melded into that meat. And then we're going to go ahead and add 1 can of tomatoes with the juice. It could be any kind of tomatoes. These are large, chunky pieces, and I will be breaking those down because my husband doesn't care for the large chunks of tomato. And then we're going to add 1 can of tomato sauce. And these, of course, are the large 16 and a half ounce cans. 1 of each is all it takes. Whatever brand that you like or whatever brand that you can afford. You're going to mix it well on low heat. Get it really good and thoroughly stirred together. If you are trying to make this stretch, then you're going to want to go ahead and add your favorite type of bean. We like black beans, but you can use kidney beans or pinto beans or any kind of bean actually. I usually will add it with the juice and all because it will make a different flavor to broth. Hubby doesn't like beans, so we've kind of dropped out of that. As we get older, it's harder to digest. So we've decided to leave those out. But we used to add the beans in, and it did make it go farther. Black beans were our favorite. If you don't like the bean liquor, you can always rinse them off before you put the beans in, and that will still help it to go farther, and it makes it hearty. I did take a taste just to see if it was the flavor profile that I was looking for, if I needed to add more salt. But as this cooks over the next several hours, the flavors will get much stronger, and right now it tastes very bright and very kind of tomatoey, which is okay if you kind of like that way of chili. I mean, we prefer ours a little bit richer tasting, so a little deeper flavor, not so fresh. Not that this tastes stale, that's not what I'm saying, but I think you understand. So I have that on my lowest setting on my stove, but even my lowest setting will burn the chili because I can't get that little stove I have to really turn down far enough. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer it over to the crock pot. That will allow me to let it just cook and not worry about it burning. And I'll come back once an hour or so and stir it until it's done. And then once the crock pot shuts off, it'll stay on keeping it warm until we're ready to eat. So I can make this up in the morning, and by dinner time it'll be finished and delicious and hot. If your stove does allow you to cook on a very, very low setting, then you can just keep it on the stove, keep it low, and stir it every half an hour to an hour, and that will work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and set it to low setting, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to 3 hours and walk away. So about an hour later, I'm coming back to take a look, and it looks wonderful and smells fantastic. This is when it's just like permeating the whole house, and we're all just salivating, waiting for it to be done. But it's better to wait. It is worth the wait. When my husband and I decided to make the transition, he retired early from his job so we could both be down here to help and assist my mom and stepdad. However, that did put some hardship on us financially, since neither of us were able to draw Social Security just yet. We made a little bit of savings from the sale of our home in the city, but it wasn't a lot because we didn't live in a very rich neighborhood. Our home didn't sell for as much as we had hoped, even though it was at the beginning of when prices were starting to go skyrocketing. But we weren't in that neighborhood of those higher homes. Let's just say it was a less than 6-figure sale. We had done a lot to the house, and it was a nice big yard at the end of a dead-end street. And we had our little homestead there for 15 years, but we had to let it go because it was time to step up and make sure that we were here for my parents. And that's okay. The little bit of savings that we did get, we went ahead and put it into our account, and that's what we decided to use to survive on for the next couple of years, or however long it will hold out. Oh boy, this chili is so good. Of course, I like mine topped with a ton of cheese. But what do you think? Yes, it is as delicious as it looks. And I hope that you will try to make some your own. Make it your own way. Make it delicious. Thank you much for hanging out with me today and listening to the talk as we make some homemade from scratch chili.